My name is Julia, I'm 23, and last year my own brother broke my ribs during a fight that should have never gone that far. What hurt even more was my parents begging me to keep it a secret. But the moment my doctor refused to stay quiet, everything changed. This is my story. Tell me in the comments where you're watching from. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories about family drama, betrayal, and courage. I never imagined that an ordinary Tuesday night would end with me lying on the living room floor, gasping for air, clutching my chest, and realizing something inside me had snapped. My name is Julia, and this is the night my world cracked, literally and figuratively. The evening had started just like so many others in our small, two-bedroom house in Ohio. The television hummed in the background, and the smell of leftover spaghetti clung to the air. My mom folded laundry at the kitchen table, humming off-key to a song I couldn't even recognize, while my dad clicked away on his laptop, barely looking up. My brother Mark, 2 years older than me, sat across the room scrolling through his phone, the blue light reflecting on his face. Tension wasn't new in our house. Mark and I had been butting heads since childhood, but lately, the arguments had grown sharper. Maybe it was because we were both adults still crammed under the same roof. Or maybe it was because Mark had a temper that seemed to ignite at the smallest spark. Whatever it was, that night the spark caught fire. It started with something stupid. Something so small that if you told a stranger, they'd laugh at how ridiculous it sounded. Mark accused me of taking his charger, though I hadn't touched it. I laughed at first, brushing him off, but laughter only poured gasoline on his anger. "Don't act like you don't always take my stuff," he snapped, his voice rising above the TV. "I don't want your junk," I shot back, rolling my eyes. That's when his chair scraped across the wooden floor. A sound that sliced through the air like a warning. My mom glanced up but quickly looked down again, her hands moving faster over the laundry. My dad didn't even flinch. "Say that again," Mark growled, stepping closer, his phone clenched in his fist. I stood, refusing to shrink back. "I said I don't want your junk. Get over yourself." The next few seconds blurred. His shove wasn't playful, wasn't like the kind of sibling push you joke about years later. It was deliberate, full of rage, and it sent me stumbling backward. My body collided with the edge of the coffee table before crashing onto the hardwood floor. A sharp, cracking sound shot through my chest, like a stick snapping in half. The pain came immediately, white-hot, stealing the air from my lungs. I tried to inhale, but it felt like knives stabbing with every breath. "Mark!" my mom shouted, dropping the shirt in her hands. But Mark didn't look shocked or sorry. He just stood there, his chest heaving, eyes narrowed, as if he was daring me to get back up. I couldn't. My arms trembled as I tried to push myself off the floor, but the pain in my chest pinned me down. "I can't breathe," I gasped, clutching my side. My mom rushed over, kneeling beside me, her hands fluttering uselessly. "Julia, honey, you're fine. Just calm down. It's probably just bruised." Her words tumbled out quickly, as if saying them fast enough might make them true. My dad finally looked up from his laptop, his expression tight with annoyance rather than concern. "What's going on now?" he asked, his tone flat. "She fell," my mom said quickly, glancing at him, her voice shaking. "She just fell, that's all." I turned my head, staring at her in disbelief. "Mom, he pushed me," I croaked, every word grinding against the pain in my chest. But she didn't look at me. Her eyes stayed fixed on my dad, silently begging him to accept the lie. Mark muttered something under his breath and stormed toward his room, the slam of his door rattling the walls. The room spun around me. My breaths came shallow, uneven. Every time I tried to take in air, it felt like a weight crushed my chest. My ribs burned as if they were on fire. "We need to take her to the hospital," my mom whispered finally, her voice shaking. My dad sighed, closed his laptop, and stood. "Fine. But nobody says a word about Mark. Do you understand?" He looked directly at me, his eyes cold. "This family doesn't need drama." Tears stung my eyes, not just from the pain but from the realization hitting me harder than the floor had. My own parents weren't going to protect me. They weren't angry at Mark for hurting me. They were angry at the idea that someone might find out. The drive to the hospital was a blur of passing streetlights and the muffled sound of the radio. My mom sat beside me in the back seat, wringing her hands, whispering over and over. Just tell them you fell, Julia. Please. It's better this way. I wanted to scream. I wanted to shout the truth so loud the whole world would hear it. But every breath reminded me how broken I was, physically, emotionally, completely. By the time we pulled up to the emergency room, I felt like a stranger in my own family. My chest throbbed with pain, but what hurt more was the silence. The silence they demanded, the silence that weighed heavier than my shattered ribs. And that night, lying on the hospital bed, I realized something that would change me forever. Sometimes the people who are supposed to protect you are the very ones who keep you chained to your pain. The hospital ceiling was a dull shade of white, broken only by the glow of fluorescent lights that hummed faintly above me. I lay on the bed, stiff, every breath shallow and calculated. A thin blanket covered me, but nothing could soften the sharp edges of pain slicing through my chest each time my lungs dared to expand. My parents sat in the corner of the room, whispering to each other. Their voices were low, urgent, but every now and then I caught fragments. Keep it simple. Don't say too much. Just stick to the story. The words rolled between them like coins exchanging hands, cold and transactional. I wanted to believe I had misunderstood, that my pain had distorted their words. But when my mother finally turned toward me, her eyes red and nervous, her lips pressed into a thin line, I knew I hadn't. Julia, she whispered, her voice careful, like she was balancing on thin ice. When the doctor comes back, you need to tell him you slipped. On the porch steps. That's all. Nothing more. My heart stuttered, not because of the pain this time, but because of the quiet betrayal laced in her tone. I searched her face, hoping to find some hidden crack where the truth might leak through, some sign that she cared more about me than the story. But her expression was firm, desperate even. Mom, I whispered, my voice hoarse. He pushed me. You saw it. Her shoulders stiffened. She glanced at my father, who finally closed the magazine he'd been pretending to read. His eyes were sharp, the kind that cut without raising a voice. Enough, he said flatly. You tripped, Julia. You'll tell them you tripped. I stared at him, my chest burning, not just from the fractured ribs, but from the weight of his words. My own parents were asking me to lie, to swallow the truth whole, like it never existed. The door creaked, and a nurse stepped in to check the monitor beside my bed. She smiled faintly, a professional smile, but her eyes flickered between me and my parents, as if sensing the tension in the air. I thought about telling her right then, blurting everything out while my parents sat helplessly behind me. But fear clamped down harder than the pain in my ribs. When the nurse left, my mother reached for my hand. Her grip was tight, almost painful. Julia, please, she whispered, her voice trembling now. You don't understand. If you say what really happened, it'll destroy us. Do you want your brother's future ruined? Do you want people at church whispering about our family? We'll never recover from that kind of shame. Her words stung like salt in an open wound. Shing. That's what she cared about. Not my ribs, not my pain, not the fact that her son had shoved her daughter so hard that bones cracked. It was the thought of neighbors gossiping, of whispers in pews on Sunday morning. Do you want to be the reason this family falls apart? My father added, his voice stern, final. Because that's what will happen if you open your mouth. I bit down hard on the inside of my cheek, tasting the faint metallic tang of blood. The guilt they poured onto me pressed like a weight against my broken chest. I wanted to shout that it wasn't me tearing this family apart. It was Mark's violence, their silence. But the words stuck in my throat. A few hours later, after X-rays confirmed what I already knew, that my ribs were fractured, the doctor walked in, his expression serious but calm. My parents stiffened like statues as he explained the treatment plan. Pain medication. Rest. No lifting, no twisting, no sudden movements. Then his eyes settled on me. Julia, he said gently. Can you tell me what happened? The room froze. My mother's grip tightened on my hand, nails digging into my skin. My father's gaze bored into me like a warning. Mark wasn't there, but his shadow loomed, heavier than the blanket over me. I fell. I whispered, the word scraping against my throat. The doctor nodded slowly, his eyes narrowing slightly. On the porch steps, right? That's what your parents mentioned. I nodded, tears burning the corners of my eyes. I couldn't look at him, not with my parents' presence pressing down on me. The silence they demanded was suffocating, heavier than the broken bones in my chest. Later that night, when my parents went to grab coffee, I lay alone in the dimly lit room. The monitors beeped softly, each sound a reminder that I was alive. But what kind of life was it when I couldn't even speak my truth? I thought about Mark, probably lying in his bed at home, scrolling through his phone as if nothing had happened. He knew Mom and Dad would cover for him. He knew their silence would protect him. And deep down, I feared he also knew mine would too. When my parents returned, they seemed calmer, as if the lie had been tucked neatly into place. My mom even smiled, brushing my hair back from my forehead. See? Everything's fine now. You'll heal, and no one has to know. Families have problems, Julia. This one just has to stay between us. I wanted to scream. Families have problems? Problems were forgotten chores. Arguments about who gets the car. Disagreements about money. Families didn't cover up broken ribs like misplaced socks. But again, the words stayed trapped inside me, caught between the need to speak and the demand to stay silent. The next morning, when I was discharged, my parents guided me carefully to the car. The sunlight was harsh after the dim hospital, and I squinted against it, every step a reminder of the damage inside me. The ride home was quiet, except for my father's occasional reminders. Remember, you fell. Don't change your story. It's better this way. At home, Mark emerged from his room, his face expressionless, almost smug. He didn't say a word. He didn't have to. The silence between us was louder than anything he could have spoken. For days, the house carried that silence like an unwelcome guest. My mother hovered, bringing me tea, adjusting pillows, but never once mentioning what really happened. My father buried himself in work, avoiding eye contact. And Mark went on as if the whole world revolved around him, untouched by what he'd done. At night, lying awake, I replayed it all in my mind. The shove, the crack, the gasps for air. My ribs throbbed, but worse was the ache inside me. The gnawing truth that my family had chosen silence over me. I realized then that the silence they demanded wasn't just about protecting Mark. It was about protecting themselves, their image, their comfort, their illusion of a perfect family. And in doing so, they had left me to carry the weight of it all. And that weight was heavier than the broken bones inside my chest. The doctor's eyes lingered on me longer than I expected, his gaze steady in a way that made me feel both exposed and strangely safe. The examination room was quiet except for the hum of the fluorescent lights above, and I could hear the faint shuffle of papers as he reviewed my x-rays once more. My parents sat stiffly in the corner, their expressions unreadable, but I could sense their impatience pulsing like static in the air. Julia, the doctor finally said, his voice low but firm. These injuries don't line up with a simple fall. My heart dropped. No one had dared to say it aloud, not even me. My ribs ached with every shallow breath, but the real pain was the silence that had been pressed on me at home. I shifted slightly on the exam table, gripping the paper sheet beneath me as if it could anchor me. My mother quickly cut in, her tone sharp. Doctor, she's clumsy. Always has been. Fell down the stairs. We just want the treatment done. The doctor didn't flinch. He leaned forward, his eyes never leaving mine. Julia, I need to hear it from you. What happened? I swallowed hard. My throat felt like it was closing, the words clawing to get out but catching on years of being told to stay quiet. My father cleared his throat, a warning sound I knew all too well. The doctor noticed. I saw the way his jaw tightened, the way his pen paused mid-note. Instead of pressing me in front of them, he straightened and said calmly, I'll need to run a few more tests. Parents, please wait outside. The room fell still. My mother started to protest, but the doctor raised a hand gently yet firmly. Hospital policy, he said. I need some privacy with my patient. The door closed behind them, and for the first time, I felt like I could breathe. He pulled up a stool and sat across from me, lowering his voice. Julia, I've been doing this a long time. I can tell when someone's been hurt by more than gravity. You don't have to say anything you're not ready to, but I want you to know, you're not alone here. Tears stung my eyes before I could stop them. I pressed the heels of my hands against my face, embarrassed by how quickly I broke down. If I say it, I whispered, my voice trembling, they'll hate me. They'll say I ruined the family. His tone softened, but there was steel under it. If you stay silent, the pain continues. Your health, your safety, they come first. You matter, Julia. That simple sentence, you matter, shook something inside me. I had spent so long believing the opposite. Believing my role was to keep the peace at any cost. I told him everything. Not in a neat, brave confession, but in halting, broken sentences, with pauses to catch my breath between sobs. I told him about my brother's outburst, the shove that sent me to the ground, the crack in my chest that stole my air. I told him about my parents' warnings, their cold insistence that family loyalty meant silence. The doctor didn't write while I spoke. He listened, really listened. And when I was done, when the room had fallen into a heavy quiet, he said, "Julia, thank you for trusting me. What happened to you is not your fault. And I promise you, I'm not going to look away." That promise carried weight. He explained that he was required to report injuries like mine, that it wasn't just his choice but his duty. My stomach twisted at the thought of my parents' reaction, but he didn't leave me to drown in that fear. "I'll take this step carefully," he assured me. "But you need to understand. Protecting you comes before protecting anyone's feelings." He brought in a nurse, someone warm and gentle who handed me tissues and stayed close while the doctor made a few calls. I caught pieces of the conversation. Words like mandatory report, suspected abuse, and follow-up care. Each word felt like a stone dropped in water, sending ripples through the fragile surface of my world. When my parents were called back in, I could see the storm brewing in their eyes. My mother's lips pressed into a thin line. My father's shoulders stiffened like stone pillars. The doctor remained calm, professional, but there was no mistaking the tension. "Your daughter's injuries require careful monitoring," he said evenly. "I'll also be involving a social worker to ensure she has the support she needs." My father's voice was tight. "That's not necessary. We'll handle things at home." The doctor shook his head, firm but respectful. "This is hospital protocol. It's not optional." I braced myself for the explosion that would surely come later, but in that moment, I felt an odd sense of protection. For the first time, an adult had stepped between me and the silence my family demanded. The hours that followed blurred together. A social worker came in, kind-eyed and patient, asking me questions while my parents sat in strained silence. I felt split down the middle. One half terrified of the consequences waiting outside those hospital walls, the other half clinging to the fragile thread of hope the doctor had given me. At one point, when I was left alone again, the doctor stopped by once more. He placed a hand lightly on the edge of my bed, not touching me but steadying the air between us. "You showed courage today," he said. "You might not feel it right now, but speaking the truth is one of the bravest things you can do." I nodded, though my chest still ached with fear as much as with broken ribs. And yet his words stuck. They rooted themselves somewhere deep inside me, in the part of me that had nearly given up on ever being seen or heard. For the first time in a long while, I believed maybe, just maybe, I wasn't as invisible as my family made me feel. That night in the hospital, lying in the narrow bed under stiff white sheets, I replayed his words over and over. "You matter. I won't look away." They became a quiet shield against the storm I knew was coming. And though the silence of my family still echoed in my mind, I realized something had shifted. I wasn't carrying this alone anymore. The hospital's fluorescent lights faded into the rearview mirror as we pulled away, and with them went the small cocoon of safety I had felt inside those walls. The words the doctor had left me with, "You matter, I won't look away," still echoed, but outside, the world was sharper, harsher, and filled with the shadows of what waited at home. My ribs throbbed with every bump in the road, but it was nothing compared to the pressure building in my chest. No one spoke during the drive. My father's hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly that the leather groaned under his fists. My mother sat with her purse clutched against her lap, staring out the window, her jaw clenched. I sat in the back seat, small and silent, staring at the lines on the road as though they could tell me where this was all leading. When we pulled into the driveway, the porch light flickered, casting long shadows across the front door. That door had always been the border between what the world saw and what truly lived inside these walls. Tonight, I knew it would feel more like a gate closing behind me. Inside, the air was thick and stifling. My father closed the door with more force than necessary, the echo bouncing through the hallway like a warning bell. "Julia," he said at last, turning to face me, "what exactly did you tell that doctor?" The question wasn't really a question. His tone was low, controlled, but it vibrated with suppressed anger. I swallowed hard, my throat dry. I just told him the truth. My mother's eyes snapped to mine, sharp and accusing. "The truth?" she repeated, her voice rising. "The truth is that you embarrassed this family. You made us look weak. Do you know what kind of trouble you could bring down on us?" I felt my legs tremble, but I steadied myself against the wall. "I didn't lie. That's all I know." My brother emerged from the living room then, his expression unreadable, though I caught the flicker of something, guilt? Irritation? In his eyes. "You couldn't just keep quiet, could you?" he muttered. Something in me cracked at those words. I had been carrying pain that wasn't just physical. The silence they demanded was suffocating, crushing me, and now it was spilling over. "You broke my ribs," I said, my voice shaking but loud enough to fill the room. "And they wanted me to act like it was nothing." The room fell into a charged silence. My father's jaw tightened, my mother's lips thinned, and my brother looked away. For the first time, the truth sat between us like a living thing, impossible to ignore. The days that followed felt like living in a battlefield with no clear sides. At school, whispers started to follow me. A teacher glanced at me longer than usual, when I winced while reaching for a book. A classmate asked if I'd been in an accident. I gave half-truths, afraid of the weight of full honesty. But the rumors had already started to form their own story. At home, the atmosphere was heavy with unspoken rules. My parents didn't yell, not openly, but their silence was sharper than any words. Every slammed cupboard door, every narrowed glance carried its own accusation. Meals were eaten in tense quiet, forks clinking against plates while no one looked at me. But outside those walls, things were shifting. The social worker visited again, this time at school, pulling me into a small office where the blinds were drawn. Her voice was steady, calm. "Julia, you're not alone in this. You have options. You have rights." Her words scared me as much as they comforted me. Options meant choices. Choices meant consequences. And I knew any decision I made would ripple far beyond me. One afternoon as I walked home from school, a neighbor, Mrs. Lawson, called out from her porch. She was older, with kind eyes and a tendency to notice things others pretended not to. "Julia, honey, are you doing all right? You've been looking pale." I hesitated, forcing a small smile. "I'm fine." But she didn't look convinced. She came closer, her voice gentle. "If you ever need someone to talk to, my door's always open. You don't have to go through things alone." The kindness nearly broke me. It was strange, how a simple offer of care could feel like both a lifeline and a reminder of how starved I'd been for it. That night, lying in my bed, I thought about her words, about the doctor's promise, about the social worker's calm insistence. Each of them had planted a seed of resistance against the silence I'd lived in. The battle wasn't only with my family anymore. It was inside me. One part of me longed to obey, to smooth things over, to restore the fragile illusion of peace. But another part, stronger now, wanted something different. It wanted freedom. I tested that strength in small ways. I spoke up in class when I usually stayed quiet. I accepted Mrs. Lawson's invitation for tea one Saturday, where we talked about books and recipes, nothing heavy, but the normalcy felt like sunlight. And when my father made a sharp remark at dinner, I didn't lower my gaze right away. I looked back, even if just for a second. Each act felt dangerous, like stepping into open fire, but it also felt necessary. The breaking point came one evening when my brother tried to apologize. He found me in the backyard, sitting on the swing that creaked with every small movement. "I didn't mean for things to go that far," he said quietly, avoiding my eyes. The swing rocked gently beneath me. "You still did it," I replied. My voice wasn't angry, it was tired, hollow. He shifted uncomfortably. "Mom and Dad, they're scared. They think if people find out, everything will fall apart." I finally met his gaze. Maybe it should fall apart. He didn't have an answer for that. He just stood there, silent, before turning and walking back inside. That night, I wrote in my journal, something I hadn't done in years. My words spilled out in messy lines. I am not the silence they want me to be. I am not invisible. I matter. It wasn't a victory speech. It was a whisper to myself, a fragile declaration in the middle of chaos. But it was mine. The battle beyond the walls of home wasn't just with my parents' expectations or my brother's actions. It was with the world's willingness to pretend everything was fine. It was in the way neighbors looked the other way, the way teachers hesitated to ask, the way family prioritized reputation over truth. But piece by piece, I was finding my voice. And once found, I knew it wouldn't be easily silenced again. The swing in the backyard still creaked softly after my brother left me alone. The night air was cool, carrying the faint scent of grass and distant wood smoke, but inside me there was only a storm. His half-hearted apology had stirred something I could no longer bury. Maybe it was the doctor's insistence, maybe the social worker's steady eyes, maybe Mrs. Lawson's quiet kindness, but I knew, sitting there under the starlight, that I couldn't keep living in this cage of silence. For the first time in my life, I whispered aloud as though testing my own resolve. It has to stop. The next morning, I walked into school with my journal tucked in my backpack. The pages inside were filled with every detail. The night of the fight, the pain, the fear, the way my parents tried to press my voice into nothing. It was messy and raw, but it was mine. During lunch, I slipped into the counselor's office without knocking. She looked up, surprised, but her expression softened. "Julia, what brings you in today?" My hands trembled as I set the journal on her desk. I can't hold this in anymore. I need someone to really know." Her eyes searched mine carefully before she opened the first page. She didn't rush. She didn't push me to explain. She just let the words I had poured onto paper speak for themselves. The silence in that room wasn't heavy, like at home. It was safe. When she finally looked back up, her voice was steady. "Julia, thank you for trusting me. We're going to make sure you're not carrying this alone anymore." For the first time, I felt the chain of silence loosen, even if just a little. That evening, when I came home, the tension was waiting. My mother was in the kitchen, her shoulders rigid as she stirred a pot of soup. "The school called," she said without looking at me. My heart thudded. "I know." She finally turned, her eyes sharp. "Do you have any idea what you've done? You're tearing this family apart." The words stung, but this time I didn't shrink. "No, Mom," I said quietly but firmly. "What tore us apart was pretending nothing happened." Her lips parted as though she wanted to argue, but no words came. She turned back to the stove, slamming the spoon down harder than necessary. For the first time, I realized her anger wasn't just about me. It was about the cracks forming in the facade she had built around our family. The days that followed blurred into a whirlwind of meetings. A caseworker sat with me in a quiet office, her notepad resting on her knee. A police officer came once, his tone calm, his presence both intimidating and oddly reassuring. Through it all, I kept waiting for fear to overwhelm me, but instead I felt something else: strength. One afternoon, while waiting outside the counselor's office, I heard two girls whispering near the lockers. "Did you hear? Julia's the one who—" "Yeah, with her brother. Crazy, right?" I froze, heat rushing to my cheeks. The whispers were sharp, like tiny knives, but then another voice joined in. It was Amy, a girl from my math class. "Hey, knock it off," she said firmly. "You don't know what she's been through. Just leave her alone." I hadn't realized she was listening, or that she cared. That small act, a simple defense, felt like another chain breaking. For so long, I thought speaking up would only isolate me. But here was proof that maybe, just maybe, it could connect me to people who understood. At home, the walls continued to close in. My father grew quieter, retreating into his armchair at night with the television blaring, as though the noise could drown out reality. My mother busied herself with cleaning, scrubbing countertops that were already spotless. And my brother avoided me altogether. One night, I found him sitting in the garage, staring at the floor. He looked up as I stepped inside. "You really went through with it," he said, his voice low. I nodded. "I had to." He shook his head, a bitter laugh escaping. Do you have any idea how much trouble you've caused me? The old me would have apologized. But not this time. Do you have any idea how much pain you caused me? I asked, my voice breaking but steady. He didn't answer. He just looked away, and for once, I didn't chase his approval. I walked out of the garage, each step heavier but freer than the last. Breaking the chains of silence didn't happen all at once. It happened in pieces. It was in the way I answered questions during meetings without glancing at my parents for approval. It was in the way I held my head a little higher when I walked down the school hallway, even when the whispers followed. It was in the late-night calls I made to the social worker, when I confessed fears I couldn't say out loud at home. It was in the journal entries I kept writing, not just about pain anymore, but about the tiny victories. Mrs. Lawson slipping me a plate of cookies with a gentle pat on the shoulder. Amy asking if I wanted to study together. The doctor's words replaying in my mind when the nights felt too long. Each moment was a link snapping, a reminder that silence no longer defined me. One Saturday morning, I stood in front of the bathroom mirror, brushing my hair slowly. The reflection staring back at me looked tired, yes, but stronger. My ribs still ached when I twisted too quickly, but even that pain had changed. It was no longer just a reminder of what had been done to me. It was proof of what I had survived. I thought back to the Julia who had whispered in the backyard, too afraid to raise her voice. She felt distant now, like a ghost of someone I had shed. When I walked downstairs, my parents were sitting at the table, cups of coffee in hand. My father looked up, his expression unreadable. "Julia," he said carefully, "we don't agree with how you've handled this. But you've made your choice." I met his gaze, steady this time. I had to. Because if I didn't, I'd lose myself completely. He didn't argue. He just nodded once, the weight of resignation heavy in the air. Later that day, I found myself back on the swing in the backyard. The chains creaked with every movement, but the sound no longer felt ominous. Instead, it felt like a rhythm, steady and grounding. I pulled out my journal and wrote one final line on a fresh page. Silence kept me prisoner, but my voice set me free. The battle wasn't over. The scars would remain, both seen and unseen. But I had broken the chains that once held me captive. And with every word I spoke, every truth I refused to bury, I knew I was building a life where silence could never control me again. The night sky stretched above me, endless and vast. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel small beneath it. I felt infinite.